You know, it was 10 years ago when Americans were in the grip of terror, not just from the September 11th attacks, but also from a series of anthrax letters mailed to news organizations and Capitol Hill. Remember this? It ended up killing 5 people. Well, after years of twists and turns, in 2008, investigators had their sights set on this government scientist named Bruce Ivins. Now, he was never charged because he killed himself, as this case heated up. And that left this whole taste of controversy, something CNN's Joe Johns takes a look at in a special CNN Presents, which premieres this weekend. Joe?
Sanjay, one of the things we take a look at in this documentary is how federal investigators came up with the name of a suspect in the anthrax attacks. It was not easy. In the first few months of the attacks, they really didn't have much to go on at all, and they were casting a very wide net. But what we do is zero in on one very important lead that they got in the early days of the investigation, which frankly took them years to fully track down. Check this out. When the anthrax letters hit in October 2001, Nancy Haywood is an up-and-coming scientist in Seattle, specializing in HIV. A few months after the attack, January 2002, the FBI emails the American Society of Microbiology's members. FBI profilers believe it is very likely that one or more of you know this individual.
In my mind, it was as though something clicked.
Who'd you think of?
Bruce Ivins.
Bruce Ivins, a scientist at USAMRIID, the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute for Infectious Diseases, Fort Detrick, Maryland. This is the Pentagon's main lab for studying biological weapons to develop protective vaccines. Ivins is an expert on anthrax. In fact, he is supposedly helping federal agents.
In January of 2002, Bruce Ivins was in the thick of it.
What the feds do not see is the hidden side of Bruce Ivins. Emails where he says, "I am being eaten alive by paranoid delusional thoughts."
Bruce Ivins has led a double life.
Psychiatrists will later describe Ivins as a secretive, paranoid, resentful, and rage-filled man.
It was a guy who had a definite dark side to him that no one else knew about.
I met Bruce in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
It was the mid-70s. Nancy Haywood was a graduate student at the University of North Carolina. Bruce Ivins was there too. Ivins asked incessantly about Haywood's sorority, Kappa Kappa Gamma. He seemed obsessed.
Every time I talked to him, nearly, he would mention it. And finally I said, you know, Bruce, that's enough.
As their careers took shape over the years, Ivins kept in touch. Shortly after the anthrax attacks, he emails these photos of himself with what he calls the now infamous AIM strain of anthrax.
He wanted his former colleagues and friends to know that he was doing important work.
One detail stands out.
He said he was working in the containment lab, and he wasn't wearing gloves. And that is a biosafety hazard. We just don't ever do that. And what that is to me, a sign. I'm immune.
Turns out there were a lot of things that didn't look right, but it took federal authorities a long time to put together all the pieces. And to this day, some people say they're still not sure the investigators got the right man. Sanjay?
Fascinating report, Joe Johns. I'll tell you, one of the people who still isn't convinced is Lori Garrett. Now, she's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who writes about infectious diseases and took a close look at this specific case. Do you believe what the final investigation showed?
I think that the case against Bruce Ivins is essentially circumstantial. I'm not sure any of it would have held up in a court of law, if for no other reason than the FBI never had chain of custody of the actual anthrax evidence, and Bruce Ivins had possession of the evidence for quite a bit of the time. Any lawyer could get that tossed right out of court.
It's called Death by Mail. The Anthrax Letters, a fascinating CNN Presents, airs this Sunday night, 8 and 11 Eastern, right here on CNN. And also this week, Diana Nyad. The third time was not a charm for her as she attempted once again to swim from Cuba to Key West without a shark cage. Now in the end, her nemesis proved to be much smaller. Now, with no way to counter toxic jellyfish that brought intense pain and partial paralysis, Naiad was forced to once again abandon her record attempt 92 miles into the swim. Naiad says she will not attempt the swim again. She said that before, though. All this, though, got me thinking, what kind of fuel does it take to power the body for such an extreme feat? Extreme nutrition in this week's Food for Life. As one expert puts it, Diana's in a race against her own body to finish the swim before she physically can't move at all. In the water, she burns about 700 calories an hour, and her swim lasted more than 40 hours. She refuels once every hour with sports drinks, gels, powders, energy bars, and her favorite, peanut butter. She also drinks about 40 ounces of water per hour to stay hydrated. But even that doesn't quite keep up with her energy needs. Eventually, Diana's body turns to burning fat, and finally protein, the very building blocks of the muscles that keep her swimming. During her last swim, she lost almost 16 pounds.